Okay, so we should be recording now. So again, students, welcome. My name is Allison Tripp. I teach anthropology here, and we have a great panel, and they're going to talk to you about why they chose their major in college and obstacles that they've overcome, career paths. After we finish asking question, or after I ask the questions, then at the end of the event, if you have additional questions, you can either write them in the chat box or you can unmute yourself and then ask any of the questions that I didn't think about or things that are really meaningful to you. So that is your time, and we definitely would love to hear your questions. So my first question for our panelists is, what made you choose your major?
I'm first on this one.
Nicole, you spoke first. You go.
Okay, all right, I'm happy to. So I changed my major once before I transferred when I was a community college student at Pasadena City College. I wanted to be a pediatrician at first, and I was just taking those pre-med courses and trying to figure myself out and thinking, wow, I'm not as interested in these courses as the psych courses, and even my history class I was really very passionate about. And so I changed my major, but I always wanted to help people. So I just kind of thought about like a compatible major that I would be doing something along the lines that I was imagining. So I changed my career path to being a child psychologist. That was my first choice. And that's what kept me going on that path in psychology, shooting for that. And I kind of discovered myself along the way, but I fell in love with my psychology courses. And so I continued that pathway.
Well, I could go next, and I wish mine was as straightforward and less bumpy than Nicole's, actually. Less bumpy than Nicole's and more straightforward. In fact, for me, political science was not my first major, and I got into it because I stumbled horribly. So my first major in college actually was astrophysics. So, you know, all the way on one side of the hard sciences, math, and then I ended up in political science in the social sciences, and a lot of that has to do with my family upbringing. I grew up with your stereotypical traditional conservative Chinese parents, for which the only appropriate careers for me had to do with either math, science, or be a doctor. And my father himself was a civil engineer in Hong Kong, and ideally he would have liked for me to end up as a civil engineer as well, to kind of live the life that he didn't get to after he immigrated to the US. For a variety of reasons, he was never able to continue on with his career in civil engineering. For me, I gravitated towards astronomy, and so for my father, not ideal, but nonetheless, I was going to use a lot of math and physics, and that was going to be okay with him. So I went to university as an astrophysics major, and by the end of the first year, I was on academic probation, and then by the end of the second year, I was dismissed from UCLA. And so then I was for the first time in my life, I was really lost in a drift and didn't really know what to do. Just trying to find my way back in before my parents found out that I had been dismissed from the university. And so I started taking night classes at UCLA Extension. It was a history class. Who the instructor was also, I would find out midway through the semester that she was also the director, at the time she was the director of the counseling department. And so I met with her to talk about a reentry or readmission, I think that's the official term, readmission program back to UCLA. And so I completed the contract, took classes and got good grades in them, in Poli-Sci and in history. And then I met with her for a long meeting, and she asked me what I wanted to major in. And I said, well, I'm an astrophysics major, for which she then promptly said, it didn't go well the first time, right? Don't you remember? But she noticed that even in my first year, when I was taking history classes and Poli-Sci classes, that I did well in them, and asked me why hadn't I thought about that. And of course, I had never thought about it because my parents just didn't, make that an option as a career path, or as a major, right, to study, and then as a career path. So it was through her. So it was through immense failure. And then, of course, seeking out the resources at the university and academic counseling specifically, that led me to political science. And like they say, the rest is history. I'll leave it there.
I'll throw in my very abbreviated journey as well. So it's similarly bumpy to Professor Tang. However, mine started out as a poli-sci major. I actually grew up with a missionary family, missionary parents in Japan. And so graduating from a Japanese high school with a Japanese high school diploma, being fluent in Japanese, I was pretty sure that my destiny was calling me to be the US ambassador to Japan. That was my dream coming out of high school. And then I entered Cal State San Bernardino and started taking poli-sci classes. Well, combination of the fact that Southern California has this thing called the beach, and that I was grossly underprepared, I think. Despite going through an education system, there was a lot of culture shock that went along with coming back into the country as well, and being on my own. I found myself in a similar situation after about 1.5 years at Cal State San Bernardino, where I was now on academic probation, failing all my classes and completely not understanding any of the concepts that were being taught to me in poli-sci. My sister was a first-year medical student at the time at Loma Linda University. So and that, combined with the fact that I got a job through a series of events as an emergency medical technician working on an ambulance here locally in San Bernardino, I quickly fell in love with the excitement and the adrenaline that goes behind the emergency scene and being able to help people. And my now brother-in-law, once as my sister and I were talking about anatomy and physiology, he said, for a poli-sci major, you sure do talk a lot about medicine, but I've never heard you once talk about law or politics. And that struck home. And it was the very next week that I changed majors to a biology major, thinking I would follow the same career path as my sister. Fast forward about 6 months later, I'm watching what she's going through, and I knew I did not have the discipline nor the smarts to do what she was doing. So kind of put my education on hold, became a paramedic, continued working that route, and then eventually got hired with the fire department. And then in my early 30s, knew it was time to come back and finish up my degree. And that degree that I chose was in occupational studies with a focus in emergency services management through Cal State Long Beach, which is something that I was already practically applying. So for me, my degree choice was much less about what my end goal was. That was how it started. It turned into what was I passionate about. And I had to go through a decade of maturing and discovering myself to really find that out. And I think that's the struggle probably for a lot of students as they enter the college system, is you're just starting to figure out who you are and what makes you tick. And yet you got to make this big decision about what am I going to do for my career. So it was a few speed bumps for me as well, but I'm happy with the decision that I made.
I'll jump in now. I'm Professor Fong. When I started my college life at UC Berkeley, I was actually, I went in as undeclared, but I thought I was going to go to dental school eventually. But along the way, I realized I was interested in a lot of other stuff besides just the pre-med, pre-dental kind of classes. And history classes, geography classes, anthropology classes. And so at some point I realized, I kind of don't want to be a dentist. But anthropology allowed me to combine all my other interests together. So, 35 years later, here I am.
And with anthropology, you can still study teeth, so didn't have to go too far. Okay, my next question is, what were some influential classes that you took? So both inside your major and outside of it.
Kind of remember the same order and go that way. So I'll start, I guess, if that's okay. When you sent me this question, I was thinking about it, and there's 3 classes in my academic journey that really stand out. One within the major is Psych 41, which is biological psychology. It stands out not because that became my passion, my area of expertise through my journey, but because it was such a challenging course for me after I became a psych major, and I was trying to kind of get away from all the science that was the pre-med classes I was taking. And then I switched my major into psychology, and I was thinking, oh, I've got this. It's so easy to know this stuff, to learn. And it was just a struggle for me. And I was always a hard worker, just willing to put in the time to studying. But it was a shock because I would put in the same amount of time and effort and not get the grades right away. And through that class, I would, communicate with the professor, and she would give me advice. And I just got better at learning how to learn on my own in that class. So it was so challenging and it was so different that is part of the reason why I became really interested in biology. And so that was one class that stands out within the major. But actually, one of the most pivotal classes that I took that really changed my major completely is a history course. I was considering psychology, and I like those psychology courses, but really what the turn of events was that changed me completely is I took a history class where we learned about the Holocaust, and we had survivors come in and speak, and we went to the Museum of Tolerance, and it was just such a great class. That it made me really question like human nature. Like, how is it possible that people could do these atrocities? I don't understand. And so I was asking those questions, and that just kind of pushed me more in that direction. Like, this is probably where my heart is in terms of asking those questions. And then toward the end of my BA program in psychology at Cal State Long Beach, I was in one of my last semesters, and I was trying to set up my schedule, and there was an elective course, and it was Black Studies. And when I took that course, just because I need to fill an elective, and I was like, that's interesting. Okay, let me take that's open. All right, let me take it. And during that time, that really opened my mind to like the fact that I'm really ignorant, and the more that we learn, the more that we know we don't know. And I was just like so curious about, the information I was learning. And I just felt like we were so brainwashed and we didn't know this stuff just growing up, just learning, history. And so I just became more and more curious about learning. And with psychology, it just kind of, all of those different areas are really compatible. And that's really why I love psychology so much, is that you're curious about human behavior, but there's so many aspects of human behavior to learn about, and it's cross-disciplinary. So we take information from so many different disciplines to put it together and understand the human as an individual. So yeah, those 3 classes really affected me, and just looking back at my academic career, I think they really made me see things differently.
So if we're moving in the same order, I'll go next. And so it's strange for me to answer this question because of course, political science wasn't my original major, but it goes back. I knew I had an interest in politics, and in particularly social justice issues as early as high school, or maybe even before high school. But I remember in high school, my government teacher, Mr. O'Neill, he was a great teacher, and of course I at the time I held differing viewpoints than he did, and maybe it's the youth in me trying to establish my individualism or whatever. But I remember debating and arguing with Mr. O'Neill constantly over social issues and social justice issues. And I remember very clearly that he said that one day I might grow up and not be an asshole anymore. And I don't know where he is right now, but I suspect that he'd be pretty happy at that. At least I think I don't know about my family, but at least I'd like to think I'm not an asshole anymore. But at least with my political and philosophical views. But social justice issues have always been important to me, and I remember taking classes in world civilization, U.S. history, especially the early U.S. history, the founding fathers and the Revolutionary War, social justice, freedom of expression, due process of law, and the fact that the world is kind of mean historically, where you've got empires and dictators and conquest of the little guys. And so classes that dealt with political philosophy and social justice and those things I gravitated towards. And then later on, when I specialized in international relations, it was particularly important to me because, or poignant to me, because civil liberties and civil rights laws, those only exist if there's a government institution to enforce them. And in international relations, there really isn't. And so I gravitated towards international relations because of the lack of, and thinking that I could probably learn more about and do something about that. And so that was important in my background.
The one that impacted me the most was human psychology. And it's a very broad-based title for this course, but really what the professor did was challenged and caused each of us as students to really dig deep into our own prejudices, our own predispositions to believing that certain societal groups, races, age groups had certain predispositions that were just accepted. A lot of the same things that we as a society are trying to work through for these past few years. So I remember sitting in that class, and as a person that grew up overseas and has been to many different countries, experienced another language, another culture, I felt like my mind was very broad and open, and that I didn't carry any of those prejudices. And at the earlier age of 30, 31, to be challenged to realize, wow, I actually do have some, and to be challenged with where did those come from? How did a person like me, who touts myself on being so open-minded and accepting of all people, develop these deep-seated feelings about certain societal, what I assumed were norms? And so what was neat as an emergency provider, having the privilege to walk into complete strangers' homes and render aid and render care, was to be able to now really leave all of those prejudices at the door and just come in completely open-minded to absorb what are the cultural and societal norms that this family that I'm treating now, or this person that I'm caring for, have. What can I learn from them? How can I reach them better? So it was a very rough class to go through, because it made me feel like I was a bad human. Like, oh my gosh, I have these horrible feelings about people. Apparently I don't like people. What am I doing? I'm in the wrong line of work. But to be broken down and then rebuild up to realize, okay, a lot of these are just predispositions that we as a society are taught and raised with. And so that was probably the most influential class in my undergrad career.
I would say within my major, most influential class for me in my career was human osteology. So that's where you learn about the human skeleton, and especially how to identify fragments of human skeletons. So that's helped me a lot in terms of my work before I came to JFE. Outside of anthropology, I would think, believe it or not, my statistics class set me up for a lot of success. I'm not a very good statistician, but I gained an appreciation for being analytical in that way. And also physical geography. That class really opened my eyes to a lot of things I liked, when I was younger, watching nature shows and going on hikes and stuff, and just sort of, learning the scientific side of how the world works. So those classes had a lot of influence on me.
Okay, my next question is, what was an obstacle that you faced in college and how did you overcome it?
I'll go next, but there are a few obstacles that I can think of. I'll try to just answer the question directly with kind of the biggest challenge was just like the work-life balance. And it's always going to be a challenge, but I always had to pay my way through school. And I knew that that's why I went to community college. I didn't even think about applying for, anything. I was a first generation college student, so I didn't even think about applying for the university. I didn't have anyone giving me that guidance either. So I was just feeling like I was on my own. So I knew I just had to work as a food server, and I tried to maximize how much money I would make with the hours that I had and be a full-time student. And so just balancing all that, I think, was a big challenge, but the way that I overcame it, I want to say time management, but I procrastinated. I had one of my best papers, I shouldn't say this, was when I didn't sleep all night and it was due the next morning, and I had my stepdad drive me to school to drop it off in the morning to the professor. But I wouldn't recommend that. But I did what I had to do. I turned in things on time. I did as much as possible, but it was my mindset that I had to change. I had to say to myself, you don't have to be perfect, but you have to have the expectation that you're going to work as hard as you can to make it happen for yourself. So I try to tell students now that that's such a big obstacle for a lot of students, is I think it's not only that they're trying to balance everything, it's that they're trying to balance everything and make everything perfect. But I think I was kinder to myself throughout that journey, because I knew that if I was just willing to work hard, and I know that I worked as hard as I could given the situation I was in at that time or at that moment, it was okay. So if I got a B in a class or even a C occasionally, and I tried for the A's, but it didn't always happen for me, especially at the beginning. And so I think that's my biggest piece of advice in terms of overcoming that obstacle is don't expect perfection, because that's not the most important thing. It's just showing up and doing as good as you can given the circumstances and trying to make the best of it. And yeah, I was always a full-time student, and I was always working and supporting myself. So I don't know anything different. I was working since I was 14. So I think the time management and balance, but being kind to yourself and kind of forgiving, I think that was the biggest one. And I'll just add one thing, because it's psychology specifically for students. A big challenge in psychology is the statistics, like Michael mentioned, Professor Fong mentioned, and the research methods class. I almost changed my major after taking those two classes. And now here I am with my background in research. I learned to love it. So you just kind of sometimes have to go through the motions and get through it and see the other side through, because it's worth it, at least from my perspective. So.
All right, I'll continue on with the same order. It sounds like a cliche, but really for me, the obstacle I really had to overcome was my own mental predispositions, or what I'm saying is that, so K through 12, or at least 9th grade through 12th grade, I was in high school, I was very academically strong. I graduated 3rd out of my high school, and then I went to a top 25 university, and where everybody else was, 3rd or better in their class. And I failed miserably. And it was really the first time for me to encounter that type of failure in the starkest sense. So I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know that I could ask for help. Because, throughout growing up under my parents, it was all about, you got to be independent, you got to be self-reliant, you got to know what you need to do, and you should not need to ask for help because you should know all the answers already. And so as I was struggling through my first year at the university, I really didn't know anything else other than the proverbial fly that's, hitting the glass window. I just kept thinking, like, I'll just retake the class, I'll try harder, and I'll retake it a second time and I'll try harder. And, and then of course they won't let you retake a class anymore. So it wasn't until I was actually, again, dismissed from the university and I took that class outside at UCLA Extension by a professor who was also an academic counselor, that it was a major revelation that it was okay to fail. Preferably you didn't, right? But if you did, it's about how you get back up. And so I was at peace with myself, sort of, that, okay, I stumbled, but how do I get back on my feet? And then it gave me peace of mind to know that I could actually go out there and ask for help in the form of counseling. And the university has, like Chaffey College has, an enormous amount of resources available. And if we're struggling through whatever it might be, it's just, ask a professor, go seek an academic counselor. The resources are there. You paid for it, and taxpayers have paid for it. And that help isn't going to come to you, but you have to go reach out for that help. And so for me, it was just getting beyond that mental block that it's okay for me to go see a counselor. Whereas prior to that, I thought, well, gee, I must be a really horrible person or a horrible scholar to be even thinking that I needed to go see some type of counseling and guidance, right? But beyond that, in terms of physical needs, I did struggle with money through most of my undergraduate and graduate life, and for a very brief moment, I did experience food and housing insecurity, but I worked multiple jobs, and as Professor Barbary mentioned, it's just time management. You just got to be on time to make sure you got things done, because bosses don't take extensions for usually don't grant extensions for things that they're expecting to be done. And I'll leave it there.
So for me, probably my biggest challenge, and it kind of goes back to what I was discussing previously, is you get thrust into a four-year degree and the college experience when you're also in the middle of that trying to become an adult, and the responsibilities of now paying bills and rent and car insurance, and, oh, my car broke and I can't just reach out to mom or dad, adult relationships and navigating through those. So there's so much maturing that takes place during those years after you graduate from high school. And at least my college experience for those first couple of years in the Cal State system, I really didn't have any professors that I connected with. They were there and they instructed, and they were good instructors. They were good professors. But I don't know that maybe it was because I was in the wrong field, in the wrong major to begin with. But for me personally, I don't feel like I was mentored by any of them. I didn't feel like I knew who to reach out to for help outside of just the help of comprehending the information that was in this class. And that is one thing so what was the solution to that? The solution to that was, I joke with my kids and other people, they say, well, how long did what did you get your degree in? And I tell them, and I said, I was on the 13-year plan, because literally it was about 13 years from the time that I started until the time I actually got my degree. But that was my solution, was to discover myself and to grow up and to become comfortable in my own skin and know my own likes and dislikes and what I was passionate about. And I think our awareness for you students that are out there, that many of you are going through those same things, or you have gone through that journey and now you're saying, hey, I'm coming back into the college system because I now know what I want to do and I know who I want to be. And recognizing that human aspect is something that I feel not only I get the opportunity to do in my class, but I see other professors in Chaffey College being very active in. So I feel like this is a good, safe place for students, no matter what age group you are, or no matter what place in your life you're in. You're really coming in and you have that opportunity to reach out to us as your professors and as your instructors to kind of help you navigate through life. We've all been on this journey before, and so we know some of the ups and downs. That's one thing I do love about the emergency medical technician program. And that course is being a 7-unit course. I get literally 8.5 hours every Friday with my students. And there are many students that have taken previous classes from me. So I know some of their stories. I know some of their journey, and being able to connect at that level and help guide them, not just through their career decisions, but sometimes through life decisions with just a little input. Yeah, I've been through that too. It is a hard decision whether you're going to fix your car or pay your rent. Those are difficult decisions. So we, as your professors and instructors, we have empathy, and we've all been there. So those were my challenges.
The challenge I can remember, because maybe I blanked out a lot of other stuff, but it was being at a gigantic university, from going from a high school with 2,000 some odd students to a university with maybe tens of thousands, and classroom, my intro classes, 600 or 800 people. And that's not an exaggeration. So getting used to a large university environment, it took a little while to get my feet.
I think you froze a bit. Oh, are you back?
Oh, sorry, I think you lost me.
Yeah.
Or I don't know where I cut out, but yeah, getting used to the big university was a challenge for me. Took a while, but I figured it out.
Okay, my next question is, describe your participation in any internships, jobs or field work that was relevant to your major.
Okay, so I was all about internships. I was all about choosing a goal, setting a goal, and making sure it's, a challenging goal, like, either pediatrician, clinical psychologist, a PhD. I'm going all the way, and that's where my mindset was. Obviously, that's not where I landed, because I was exploring myself while I was in school in terms of, what I would think about was, how do I get as close as possible to what I'm envisioning my future looking like right now, while I'm going to school and while I'm a food server at Claim Jumper, all this time, what can I do? So I called this local office, and because I would pass it on my way to work. And I just said, I'm a student of psychology. I just want to get, familiar with what it's like to be a clinical psychologist. I know you have, people working there. It's a private practice. And they said, oh, we can find something for you to do. I said, I'll do anything, like paperwork or whatever. And so that's how I started. I did an internship with a child psychologist where she had diabetes, and I needed to read articles to her every Friday. So in exchange for me reading her articles every Friday for just a couple hours, she would share a day in the life, and she would give me a lot of insights. And what I realized at that time was this is not something that I can see myself doing now that I'm in this environment. So I was still on the path, though. I'm like, I'm going to choose like the highest goal. Let's see where I fall on the way, and where I fit. And then I started, I did internships with professors, and I tell students all the time to do that. As soon as you step foot on campus at your university, when you transfer, get involved in a lab. Just what I did is I went up to 2 of my favorite professors in the first semester I was there at Cal State Long Beach, and I asked if they needed help in their labs. And they said yes, and they were totally different studies that I worked on. One was social psychology, one was gerontology, and cell phones and driving. So we're the reason why now we can't drive with our cell phones, because that's where it all started, in that lab that I worked in at Cal State Long Beach, one of us, a few. And then since I had that experience working with professors, I decided to continue getting research experience, but I was always thinking about money because I had to, because no one else was taking care of me financially. So I thought, I'm going to graduate with my bachelor's degree. I have some research experience now from campus. So what can I do to maximize the money that I make while I'm in grad school? So I knew I was going to grad school. And so as soon as I graduated with my BA, I went to monster.com and checked out what I can do and how much I can get paid. And I wanted to build my resume and make sure it lined up with my future goals. And so I started applying, and I got these interviews at UCLA, and there's a UCLA Biomedical Research Institute, and then the Semel Institute for Neuroscience. And I got hired at both places, 2 different projects, pretty much at the same time. And I got paid a lot more than I did as a waitress. I never thought that was possible, or a food server, I should say. And so then I fell into like kind of doing neuroscience, and I would, we would do PET scans and MRIs, and I was trained on the diagnostic procedures and just doing computer testing with our inpatients and our participants. And it was just a really great time. It helped me to find where I fit in all this. And I fell in love with just learning more. I was always curious. It makes sense. Going back to the curiosity I had, I was just so excited about learning. And, students often think that research is not, they don't think about research when they enter psychology. And it really, like I said, it deterred me from the major, but it's really people focused. You're not just in a dungeon entering data. There's so much that you're doing involving people and interacting with people. So for me, it was very satisfying. And then I started doing supplemental instruction when I was in grad school. One of my professors nominated me for that. And then I fell in love with teaching. And then I tried my hand at teaching after that next year. I taught biology labs at USC. And that really cemented the fact that I love the challenge, and it was outside of my area of expertise. So yeah, that's my journey. And I think, all those things that I just said yes to, I didn't know what I was getting into, but because I just said yes, let's do it. And you believe in me, okay, then I'll believe in myself. And it really made a difference. And I think that the mindset again for me was like being open-minded to discovering myself on my journey while I was shooting for those goals. So I had this goal that was the highest that I could think of at the time, but obviously I had a different pathway ultimately, but I was like open enough to kind of be okay with that. And I think sometimes students get worried that if they make a decision early on, then it's going to affect them. And that's a big deal to change it. You get stuck, but you're not. Everything you do makes a difference, and you don't know how or why, but if you're just open-minded and you do things, you follow your heart, what you're interested in, then it's all going to come back. It's going to come together. And so you just have to know how it's shaping you. So yeah, that's my journey with internships.
All right. I share a lot of Professor Barbary's views about internships, including the dungeon, and I've got a little story about that too. I can't emphasize how strongly I agree with her that, and I think for everyone else on the panel as well, that internships are vitally important for you to figure out whether or not your major or the career that you're thinking of is ultimately going to be right for you. Because in an internship, you're going to be doing something, an aspect of what you might be doing if you completed your schooling and you get into your career for the next several decades. And so for me, actually, I actually secured a undergraduate research assistantship, an internship with an astronomy professor who had spent the last year and a half in Chile recording data about, well, his particular field of research was pulsars, or the radiation bursts of pulsars and supernovae remnants. And so he was in some observatory in Chile, and he recorded all this data. And so for my particular task on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 6:30 until 8:30, I was supposed to take these huge data disks and shove it into a deck station. I think that's what they were called. And I would then, run this simulation, and it would crunch the data. And then, after 20, 30 minutes, I pull that thing out, grab another disk and shove that in there, and then run it over and over again. So I'm in this computer lab that was shared in the physics department. And there were other students, graduate students probably in there as well. But what I realized was, nobody is talking to each other. And I mean, aside from you go into the room and you just kind of wave at people, and then everyone's just staring at their own computer monitor. And what troubled me the most was I can't imagine that everybody else was hard at work. I mean, we're hard at work waiting for the computer to do what they were supposed to do. I just realized then that this was probably not a career that I wanted to end up with, or at least not that particular aspect of it. But again, I didn't know that I could change my major and I could do something different. But the signs were there. And so as much as internships can show you what you can do and be excited about, it could also show you what you probably don't want to do in the future, and of course change your major or program of study when appropriate. So then as a graduate student, I got accepted as an intern with the US State Department, and I was assigned to the Consulate General in Guangzhou, China, also known as Canton. And so I rotated through the various departments of the consulate. We issued student visas, marriage visas, immigration visas. Then I participated in a joint project with the Commerce Department and set up a fair that was promoting American products in China. And I did investigations on visa fraud. And but the most rewarding thing was that was the summer that President Bill Clinton did his Asia trip, and he spent 5 days in China. And the consulate that I worked in was responsible for about a 10-hour stop in this city called Guilin, China, which is sort of it's the equivalent of Yellowstone or Yosemite in China, and so it's for its natural beauty. So, but my point is, through that internship, I absolutely loved the government, Foreign Service, State Department, and I thought that was what I was going to do. I came back, took the Foreign Service Officer's exam, and I didn't pass. But then I went back to graduate school, and while I was there, now working on a doctoral program, I got teaching assistantships, and which also paid for my graduate studies. And it was through that experience of teaching these discussion classes with my own students that I really fell in love with teaching. And then the rest is history. Everything else was less important, and this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my my productive life, hopefully.
So any career, any educational path or degree that is associated with emergency medical services or fire technology, one of the super unique things about it is your entire journey is your internship. So what's unique about the emergency medical technician course here at Chaffey, you take EMT 405, which is a 3-unit, 1 semester intro to emergency, intro to EMT, kind of the prep course. And then you take a 7-unit EMT course for 1 semester, either Tuesday, Thursday nights every week or all day Friday. And you are literally given all of the tools and certification capability you need to go get your EMT license and get a job working either in an emergency department or on an ambulance. And so that was what I did. I took the summer course at Crafton Hills College back in 1994. And then a month later, I found myself on an ambulance working, making money, realizing that this is actually what I really did want to do. And then your people can step into, okay, now I would like to make a little bit more money doing this and would like to have a little bit more autonomy and decision-making capability. So they would go on to a paramedics program, which is a year-long program in most colleges that offer it. And then they'll take fire technology courses because they no longer just want to work on an ambulance. They want to get hired with a fire department. So really, I didn't have to do, obviously in paramedic school, you do a 2.5-month field internship where you're shadowed by a preceptor and you're performing as a paramedic under that kind of that scrutiny of seeing how you do. And that's key to your successful completion of the program. But when I wasn't doing my internship, I was working on an ambulance doing the exact same thing, just as an EMT. So this career path is super unique in that the entire educational journey is really tied to an internship. You can work, make a living, and intern in the field that you're continuing to get your education and your degree in as you go along. So super unique opportunity that we have in that program.
When I was in my bachelor's degree years, I was lucky enough to get a job working in one of the museums at UC Berkeley. So they called us curators, but we weren't dealing with the public. We were dealing with behind the scenes stuff, preparing material or preserving material, that sort of thing, which set me up for an internship I got during the summer of my senior year, working as an archaeologist for the Bureau of Land Management in Utah. That was a really good experience, and all of that helped set me up for working as after I got my degree, working as an archaeologist and able to save money to help me get through grad school. So things build upon each other. I consider myself lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time when these jobs were advertised. But a friend of mine says you make your own luck too. It's like if you didn't have the skills, they wouldn't have hired you anyways. So, do well in school, get yourself in a good position to capitalize on that later on.
Mike, if you don't mind me saying, I have this plaque that I have in my office, and it says, "I believe in luck. The harder I work, the more of it I have, or the more luck I have," something like that. It's been a while since I've been in my office, but no, I'm there occasionally. But anyway, I like that. It's true.
Definitely good advice.
Yeah.
Okay, my last question is, can you discuss a couple of career paths that a student might not know about that are connected to your major? So all of our students know that we are professors, so that is one career path, but obviously there's many, many more things that they can do. So if you all can elaborate on those ideas.
Sure. So with psychology, there's a lot of misconceptions that it's narrow, that you can't make a lot of money. You're only thinking about therapy, which is a great career, but that's usually the prototypical career when you think of psychology. But students don't know that it's very broad. In fact, we have, fields like IO psychology. That's very, it's a lucrative career, and it's newer in the field of psychology, where we combine psychology with business. And so you work as like a business consultant in a variety of ways, and companies hire you to come in and build rapport among their employees or change websites and make it more user-friendly. There's just so many things that you can do in IO psychology. There's also health psychology that studies the immune system and psychology and how it combines. And also there's human factors. At Cal State Long Beach, when I was a student, my graduate degree was psychology with an emphasis in research. So it was more general. I took a lot of different courses and it was more research based. But I worked alongside my peers who were taking human factors. And at the time, I really didn't hear anything about human factors. But now it's bigger than at the time I was a student. But it's all about like designing cockpits. I know that some of my peers, they went on with their degree and worked at Boeing. They even got placed in internships with like Boeing. So you can, work on like how the configuration of machinery, including planes, and knowing about sensation and perception. There's biological psychology and neuroscience. There is a counseling psychology, which is different. You'd work more like in the school setting. And then there's also sports psychology. So if you're into sports, you can think about, a career in sports psychology. So just listing a few, there are so many more, but students don't know about those subfields of psychology or career paths. And yeah, so if you want to explore more, please email me and I'd be happy to talk more about those careers. But yeah, so many. Yeah.
Well, one of the a general misconception or misperception of political science is that you end up working in politics or you become a politician. And so similar to what Professor Barbary said, it's just this narrow perception of what you can do with the major. But in fact, political science is like any of the liberal arts majors, social behavioral sciences. You get professional skills that you could apply to pretty much everything else in the professional world. So we're learning how to do research, learning how to write and do presentations. And these are skills that you can apply and take advantage of any career opportunities out there. But in particular with political science, well, for one thing, first off, if you look at a list of all the elected officials in the state legislatures or the federal government, representatives and senators, you'll notice that political science isn't their job prior to becoming a legislator. I mean, they were engineers, doctors, farmers, many of them are lawyers, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But with regards to political science, as you move forward in your studies, as you get closer and closer to your career, you'll be thinking about whether or not you want a job in the public sector or the private sector. And then within the public sector, you will then further differentiate whether it's going to be public sector in government or public sector in non-government. So with regards to government, right, we're talking about the lowest levels, city government, municipalities, county government. Then you can think about the state positions or jobs within the federal government. And again, you don't major in poli-sci to be a politician, but you could be the lobbyists, the researcher, the data gatherer, the statistician that can facilitate the policymaking of those particular politicians. And then particularly meaningful from my perspective is the non-governmental side of public service, and that's advocacy of civic groups, non-governmental organizations that give voice and resources to those who really don't have much, right? So we're talking about advocacy groups for the homeless, for children, for women, animal rights, environmental protection. So then again, those are the public sector, public service areas. But there's the private sector as well: consulting, international finance, banking. You could work as a researcher or a lobbyist for a multinational corporation or any large business company entity. And of course, political science is the #1 gateway undergraduate major to a law degree. So most people who enter law school, right, they first major in political science, but that's not the only avenue, of course, but it's the most common one. But like Professor Barbary said, the sky's the limit in terms of what you can really do with a poli-sci major.
For emergency medical technician and fire service, one thing that's kind of unique about this program is that maybe unlike some other majors in universities and community colleges, most of the professors and instructors are either current or retired providers, people that had actually done a career in the field of paramedicine or in the fire service, myself included. I'm still a current fire captain and a practicing paramedic here locally in Rancho Cucamonga. So education, if you're looking to be a teacher in this field, plan on spending some time in the field before moving into the educational environment. Just that practical, hands-on, real-world experience goes a long way to help you to navigate through teaching the material to new students. But some of the other careers that you can go through with this is not just obviously becoming a medic on an ambulance or a firefighter paramedic. Those are probably the more common career paths that students take after pursuing this career. But every fire department has a fire prevention bureau, and fire prevention is very active in Southern California, especially. We kind of have set the tone, the state of California set the tone for the rest of the country on laws with building construction and things of that nature to help prevent fires and the fatalities that go along with them. So if you in fire investigation, fire prevention, that is definitely a career path that some students can take. Most fire departments have a public education coordinator, and that position is extremely important to being the face of each fire department within their community, and that community outreach that goes along with that. There is such a value, as we all know, in today's society, in that social media outreach and the brand that we carry. In every fire department, every private ambulance company, they have their brand and what they are marketing to say, hey, this is what we are providing to the community. Disaster preparedness coordinators and people that work in that field, we see some of those coming out. And then I have a lot of students that come through that really don't plan on pursuing a career as an emergency medical technician, a paramedic, or a firefighter. They are actually looking towards pre-med and either becoming a nurse, a PA, or a physician. And this kind of jumped out as a neat class or an intriguing class for them to take, where they could start to learn some of those principles. And I'd say maybe about 20% of the students that we have come through our program are ones that are looking long range at a medical career. And this is just kind of an intro foot in the door.
I would say that other than becoming a professional anthropologist, and Professor Tripp can jump in here as well, with an anthropology degree, you can use that for just a ton of other things. I always tell my students, if you do not want to become a professional anthropologist, that's fine. You can still use your anthro degree in practically any field that deals with people in some way, whether it's business or international business or politics or law school or being a doctor or a nurse or EMT, right? Any of the medical fields, social work fields, translators. There's just a whole entire realm of things that you can be doing where you're having to interact with people, and that anthropology degree is a good background to all of that.
And if you want something specific in the field, so, I don't think there are a whole lot of cultural anthropologists, right? I mean, there are cultural anthropologists who go out in the field and they study different populations. Most of them are professors that are doing that with grant money. But there are also, of course, archaeologists, people who are excavating sites. Again, most of the time they're working with universities, but they could also be doing contract archaeology. So they could be working for BLM or something like that. And then, of course, we have anthropologists that are working in museums, so really, yeah, anything that involves people, you can kind of specialize and go into that area. So we're at 4 o'clock, but do any of you students have any questions that you would like to ask any of our panelists? You can either write in the chat box or unmute yourself.
So I'm actually not going to ask for myself, but the question is for I can't pronounce your name, Stalpaton. And I got asked this question about maybe 2 weeks ago. I have a friend that's going to become an EMT, and she asked me, will I respond if I find a friend like in an accident?
So that is one of the definite challenges, I think, in maybe unique to the career path that I've chosen and what this degree may put you in, is that sometimes you do have to come across, well, one, you're guaranteed to have to come across trauma and emergencies. And once in a blue moon, if you're unfortunate enough to that trauma or that medical emergency can involve somebody that you know, or somebody that a friend or a colleague knows. I've had those situations where I've been treating somebody and then discovered that it was one of my coworkers' kids that was involved in the accident. So how do you deal with those? That is a whole nother 1 hour session plus some. I think knowing who you are, finding your own emotional, spiritual, mental fortitude, knowing your outlets, and the fire service is much more in tune with post-traumatic stress disorder and all that goes along with that. And we are recognizing that as a disease process, and that we need to tackle those events as they happen rather than sweeping them under the rug, as many of my predecessors did and as I did for the first 20 years of my career. So really, Omar, that's a great question there. And the short answer is there is no way to prepare for that, except to realize that we are all humans and things will affect us. And unfortunately, in the line of work that this degree pathway leads you to, you will be there for people at their worst moment. And sometimes it may be people that you know, but there is an opportunity and a grace in that comes with that position and wearing that badge, where you have been given a gift that you can potentially reach out and help save somebody's life. And there are very few career paths that I could have foreseen that would have given me that opportunity.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Okay, well, thank you all for attending. Thank you to our panelists for sharing all this. I hope that this helps you as students to kind of think about what you want to do in the future, how to get resources, you know, all this kind of information. If you do have questions, of course, you can reach out to myself or any of our panelists. I will be posting this video, so if you missed the first 20 minutes, you'll be able to review that later as well. And then there was a session that we had from 1 to 2 p.m. I'll post that one as well, so that you can watch all of these if that's helpful to you. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Pleasure.
Yeah.